What's up, everybody? We are coming here with you with two new guests. You got Mark and myself, Jimmy on the mic here, and across the table from us is Ben and Larry from Vortex. And these guys are going to be able to introduce themselves here. In fact, why don't we actually have them introduce themselves right off the bat? We brought these guys in to discuss the topic of fishing. Now, we've had kind of our 101 podcast on a number of different things. We just recently, not too long ago, discussed waterfowl. We've done a lot of hunting, shooting-related things, and just figured fishing is just right in there. And we actually shot out a little email across the company, said, hey, we got any folks around here that like to discuss the topic of fishing? And it was overwhelming how many people responded with the fact that they've been fishing forever. You know, we've heard a lot of that, fishing for all different kinds of things, which I think we're going to get into here a little bit for people that are new into fishing. There's like a gazillion different kinds of things under the water. But anyway, chances are we're probably going to have to talk to more people about more topics on fishing. But these guys seemed excellent to discuss this kind of 101 level, if you will. So why don't you guys kick it off? We'll go in alphabetical order. So Ben, you'll start. And, tell the listeners out there who you are, what you do, and,
Yeah, Ben Schneider, and I work down in the quality care department, take care of scopes, do some inspecting right away, and then also do some repairs to make sure that when they go out there, they're ready to go.
Right on. And you've been fishing for how long?
I'm 33 and about 30 years.
Okay.
Definitely started with, like you said, Snoopy pole.
Yeah.
That's the way to start.
Solid.
Well, I'm Larry Whipperfirth. I work in customer care, get to talk to a lot of our customers out there. It's a lot of fun. And I've been fishing, actually, I figured it out the other day, 52 years. There was no such thing as a Snoopy pole when I started.
Yep.
Haddon 303 spin cast rod. One of my first fish was caught less than 4 miles from here at Birch Lake, so got kind of some history in the area.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. A wealth of knowledge across the table. Mark, you've been fishing for a while too, haven't you?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. So I've been fishing since I was 3, actually. We've got, 42 now. I can't believe it. So
3 must be like, Larry, when did you start? How old were you?
I was probably 5.
Okay, all right.
Before I got to go along.
Like 3 to 5, though, is the general
Yeah.
theme in here. That was when people started fishing.
I'll say this, though. Like, it definitely had, I remember, I have a memory from that day. Like, I think that's kind of about the time you start actually formulating memories.
Yeah,
and
not many of them, but it's kind of hard to think back. But
yeah, I've got some flickers from that day. So it was obviously like an impactful thing that stuck with me.
Yeah. I have fished, but I wouldn't say that I am a fisherman. But pretty much every time I fished, I do remember it. Like even back to when I was pretty little, and basically just like, there's some of those situations where you're on a dock where there's just fish where you can basically just drop the hook in and pull it out and there's a fish on it,
Yeah.
Just doing stuff like that to catching some bass at some point. That was like the highlight of my
It's
small
fun.
fishing career.
I am proud to say that I've never, throughout my fishing career, if you will, I never had a push button reel, and then I feel like that's
You're proud to say this.
I feel like I'm proud to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like
You're
That's pretty cool.
open facer.
Yeah.
You're totally open facer.
totally
right away.
open face, 100%.
Big open face guy.
Lifetime open facer.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's a point of pride for me.
I've caught a lot of tree bass.
Yeah.
A lot of like dad's shirt bass. Just other kinds of things that aren't real bass.
The first big bass I ever caught, I was hung up on a lily pad trying to get it off,
Really?
and the bass took it off for me.
There you go.
Right off the lily pad.
Yeah, I was
Thought it
fishing.
was a
I was
frog.
fishing a tube jig, and it got hung up. I was like, and then all of a sudden the lily pad started fighting back. I'm like, what's going on? And then he took off the pad, and it was like a 3-pounder.
Sweet.
Nice.
Anyway.
Nice story.
So when it comes to the topic of fishing, I'll be the hashtag relatable one, perhaps, to somebody who is at the 101 level, because I feel like I was just discussing with these guys, I don't know anything about fishing, aside from the fact that there's a lot of different kinds of fish out there. To do a 101 level, this is another thing that we were, Mark and I were bickering about. And
We weren't bickering. We were
bickering,
discussing.
Mark. And
Constructive discussing.
yes, raised voice discussion. No, our voices weren't raised. Anyway, but what we were discussing was the fact that to do like a fishing 101 is kind of difficult, it sounds like, because the way the way you fish for bluegill is different than the way you fish for bass, different from the way you fish walleye, different from the way you fish muskie. The rods, the reels, the bait, the where you go, what you fish out of or off of is all different.
Type of water you're going to find these fish. Now, I mean, I think there's definitely going to be like commonalities and tactics that you can probably use across the board.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, bass are different than pike, that are different from muskies, that are different from steelhead, rivers to lakes.
So what do you say to get somebody perhaps excited about the fact that there are so many different avenues one can take with fishing? What are some examples of very different types of fishing? We'll boil it down maybe here in a bit and get down to what's a good way to start. But also, if you are somebody that's just curious as to, is fishing going to get old quick, or are there many different kinds? Like what's out there? Like some examples.
The best example is, number one, to break it down, take them where there's fish. I mean, number one, go where there's fish. And we were talking earlier about panfish, bluegills, crappies, brim if you're down south. Go somewhere where fish are readily available. There's a lot of panfish all over the country. They bite in relatively shallow water. So, and there's a lot of
can be accessed from the bank. So
shoreline fishing. Shoreline fishing is awesome, and there's a lot of public access. We always talk about public access for hunting. There's 10 times more public access for lakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of shorelines oftentimes have public access to them, like rivers and stuff too, and things like that.
And a lot of townships are building piers specifically for just fishing. I mean, they're not boat landings. Boat landings are not good places to fish. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of traffic in and out and a lot of activity. So, and there's a lot of streams. There's a lot of rivers. I grew up on the Wisconsin River 2 blocks off. Yeah. Kind of cut my teeth there.
So pan fishing, is something that you can generally do in the shallower water. Like, what's an example of what's the thing that makes walleye fishing different from pan fishing? Just again, kind of giving people some examples of just what's out there.
Walleye fishing, the best walleye fishing is in the most brutal conditions: spring, fall. There's summer bites all over the place, but you have to have a boat. Mm-hmm. So probably not the best fish to start on.
That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, just an example again out there. But what do you guys like to fish the most? Ben, what's your favorite fish to go after, and how do you do it?
That's a pretty tough call. I mean, last night I went trout fishing, and that's definitely one of my favorites because you were just kind of, not always, but you're alone with the stream, and you have like all the sounds and the silence of nature. And I guess it would be probably trout. Trout and then muskie are fun to fish for, but it gets a little frustrating because it's not very often you catch one.
Yeah.
I mean, like you look at even the magazine, Muskie Hunter, right? Like muskie fishing to me is more like hunting. I mean, you're working hard for days, possibly weeks for like that one opportunity.
Yeah.
And then when it happens, it's amazing and it's a big accomplishment. But, to Larry's point, like you're investing a lot of time and money and effort into.
Even your shoulder gets sore.
Yeah. Oh my god!
I mean, you're casting big baits for 10 hours. At the end of the day, you feel it.
How were you fishing for those trout?
Last night I was just using a spinning rod and then some smaller like jigs that I could drop, into holes and that kind of stuff, and just kind of let them flutter. Like I know a lot of people more fly fish. If people don't fly fish, they're going to more use like live bait or spinners is the most classic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, like for listeners who may not know even what a jig is, like, I mean, there's multiple styles of jigs, but maybe talk about the one that you were fishing in this stream, maybe talk about the type of water that it was and how you were fishing it.
Well, so last night it was the Black Earth Creek, probably about 15 miles from here. And I got down there about 5:30, which is a good time to trout fish, like right before dusk. And mosquitoes come out, which was a little negative, but I was actually using a crappie jig, which is meant for crappie and panfish and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
What I like about it, though, is, like I said, the ability to kind of let the current play the bait. Mm-hmm. So you're casting it in instead of retrieving it right away. You're actually letting it like fall into the current and kind of mimic a natural bait, like a minnow or a crayfish.
Okay. Gotcha.
Pretty sweet. Larry, what's your kind of, I guess if you had to pick a favorite, again, just kind of giving people different tastes of what's out there.
I'm kind of a walleye addict.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it's kind of what I do. I mean, I'll be fishing from now up until the lakes freeze. I'll be out there in the boat.
That's the one you said is when it's pretty harsh out.
Yeah. So spring fishing when the rivers thaw out and everything is a good time pre-spawn. But right now, fall, winter's coming. Fish are feeding. I mean, this is a awesome time to fish. A lot of guys are in their bow stands and pheasant hunting and waterfowl hunting and doing everything else. And I'm sitting in a boat trying to catch a fish that's a lot smarter than I am.
Like my perception of walleye are that they're finicky. Would that be like
They're not really finicky. They're easy to catch. The hardest thing is to find them. They move all the time.
okay?
They move they follow food. I mean, their whole life, other than spawning, they follow food.
Yeah.
So you got to find places where their food is. And once you find them, they're relatively easy to catch.
Okay.
So you're obviously in a boat, so you're probably in a lake and it's deeper water or something like that.
Deeper water, fishing on. Right now in Wisconsin, the water's getting colder. So once the water gets colder, I mean, this is probably too much for a beginner fisherman. Water turns over. The oxygen level goes from more on top and less on the bottom to the same from top to bottom. So fish can be anywhere. Fish can be anywhere. So now you got to kind of figure out where the bait does. So the bait goes to deeper water because it's warmer, or because it stays at a steady temperature. It doesn't have these big up and downs. So walleyes that will move. I mean, I'm fishing river systems, so they're kind of migrating towards their spring spawning areas already. And they're following the bait. The bait spawns, obviously, too. The walleyes are following them in the fall. Totally different pattern than spring, totally different than summer. So we're fishing on the deepest water available, depending on whatever body of water we're in right now. So
Interesting.
yeah, and it's cold. When it's cold, they bite the best.
Yeah. Good to know.
And is that just because they're ramping up, getting ready for winter then?
Yeah, they're putting on fat right now. Putting on fat, they get pretty docile in the winter in some waters in this part of the country. And then they're putting on fat for their spawning.
Okay,
Right. They're feeding the eggs.
So like you said, Larry, maybe some of this stuff is pretty high level for 101, but I figured, why not just kind of see what's out there. When we did that, I remember we did the long range podcast and you just discuss some of the crazy stuff, and you just got to dial it back, right? So going back to somebody who's just starting out, they hear, water can flip. There's, fish have spawning things where they're in different places at different times of the year. There's different times of the year that are better to fish for certain fish, different places. Again, like you said, rods, reels, bait, jigs, bobbers. It's kind of overwhelming. And when you go into a fishing shop where there's just like everything there's a lot. So how do you boil it down for somebody who's just trying to start? What's kind of a universal good way to start, and what would their setup be? Rod, reel, bait, bobbers. Where would you guys first start off with that?
What I would start by is when I was growing up, I was kind of a bait shop bum. Hung around bait shops. My family fished, but they were more hunters, and I kind of dug fishing a little bit more. So I hung out at bait shops, rode my bike to the bait shop, and found out who fished. I mean, old guys are great because they fish a lot and they know a lot about fishing. What I would do is a lot of stores have seminars right now. Our state DNR has seminars, no matter what age you are, on beginning fishing. But basically, I would get a medium rod, medium action, which means it's not too stiff and not too light,
Does it say that on the tag? Like this is medium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or on
like fly rods go in weights, which gets a little confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Spinning rods, open face, and bait cast push button rods come in action. So they stay with ultralight, light, medium, heavy, and heavy. So medium rod will fish. You can catch 90% of fish in fresh water.
Yep.
And a spinning rod means it's not a fly rod, right?
Correct.
It's kind of like your traditional.
The spool spins
Yeah. Okay.
when it brings in the line.
Got it.
I guess that's the easiest.
And then versus also like what would be like a casting reel or like a
bait
level
casting.
wind reel where you've got kind of like that.
Yeah, it's the line goes back and forth. The spool spins this way, and the line goes back and forth. And it's a whole different skill set to use those.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Nets,
So a
everything.
spinning reel is the one you want to start with.
I think, yeah, if you're beginner fisherman, a spinning rod and a spinning reel, and then Larry nailed it with like a medium action rod, and also on spinning rods or even casting rods, they'll generally have like a line test rating on there, whether it's a 6 to 12 or a 8 to 17. I'd be curious to get your guys' take on, but I've got a rod. I think it's actually a fairly fast action rod, but it's a 6 to 12 as far as the test rating on it. I use that thing for everything from smallmouth to largemouth to pike to like.
Does that 6 to 12 have a unit attached to it, or is it just an arbitrary 6 to 12?
I think that's like the pound test.
It's like
That's
a line
recommended.
test rating. So when you're talking,
Okay.
when you're looking at the type of line that you're going to be using, right? Generally, and I want to get your guys' take on this. I'm a mono guy, monofilament, but
Oh, shoot. What? Just a type of line.
well,
Is that what you're saying? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
monofilament versus like kind of like these braided lines
Braided
that are
lines,
out
yeah.
now.
Okay.
Actually, they've been out for a long time, but dude, I use that for everything. Walleye fishing, everything. I'd say that's like that's not even like an 80-20 for me. It's like a 90-10.
All right.
But anyway, what's your guys' take on that?
I was a mono guy till my whole fishing career until about 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
Switched-
so that's
Would you
Yeah.
a
switch
long
to?
time.
Fireline or?
I switched to, there's different braids out there. I mean, Fireline, there's Spider Wire was the first. So
Yep.
anybody that knows braid knows the word Spider Wire.
Back
That
in
was
the
kind of a
90s.
category name. I switched to braid. It lasts 10 times longer, so you're not respooling every year. So it's economic. It's stronger for its diameter. So you could have, and now we get in the weeds again with pound test. So the breaking strength. So you can get something that breaks at 20-pound test. That's the diameter of 6 pound. Versus
In the mono.
in braid. Versus mono, that's 6 pound test, and it breaks at 6 pound test.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or it breaks at 6 pounds.
Right.
So I'm a braid guy. Knots are stronger. You can tell when it's getting bad. Mono is clear, or colored. So you get microscopic nicks in it. I mean, you can lose a fish of a lifetime because of a simple thing like what's connecting your rod and reel to your bait. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the weakest connection
Yeah.
right there. So I want to put everything in my favor. And that's why I don't know what Ben thinks about it, but I'm a big braid guy.
I grew up using mono. I still will. It depends. Like if I'm fishing for anything that has teeth, I'm going to try to use braid or at least a leader. Mono seems, I mean, I think the reason I switched to braid was I was trout fishing and it wasn't a huge trout, maybe 16, 18 inches. I watched it come up and take my bait. I set the hook and it snapped right away. So I started looking online, and a lot of people started recommending like use Fireline or anything that has that braided just durability. It's a lot. I've even noticed too, like I'll pull a lot more baits out when I'm getting snagged on a log or a rock because it just has more tension. It has more strength.
Conversely, like I've had trouble when I'm actually like trying to break it off, and then I
it.
can't.
You can't with braid.
Yeah.
You can pull the hook straight, or you might break your pole,
Right.
or pull in a log.
It's like, or like that's a ton of stress on your reel. Like, I don't know. Like I've tried braid, and
Is
and
it-
I probably haven't given it its due. But
Is it?
and I'm probably set in my ways. Honestly, I just like mono.
That happens.
Yeah, is it better to have a line that can perhaps more easily break, but is maybe easier to work with a little bit, like a mono at first, than to go straight to braided, or is it kind of 6 one, half dozen the other?
Braid is kind of I call it a line for all seasons. Monofilament gets very stiff when it's cold.
And that that's another thing to bring up. Like some lines are better suited for a casting reel. Some lines are better suited for a spinning reel.
Yeah.
I guess some lines are for like maybe there's a term like softer versus more rigid. And like you said, and then temperature can change that as well.
Yeah, and the good thing about mono is it's invisible to fish.
Okay.
Usually braid has got a color like your shirt or a black, or they even make high-vis stuff for darker water. So it depends on the type of water you're fishing in. If you're fishing in the Mississippi River, the muddy Mississippi, it doesn't matter what color line you have on because the fish can't see as well. In clear water, I mean, monofilament is this color.
Like a clear water bottle.
Yeah. So there are some times I do use braid, but I always tie a section about this big of monofilament between my braided line and my hook.
Oh, so it's got a little space of
Yeah.
invisibility
Yeah.
where, like, what was that, 2 feet long or something?
Yeah.
Well, and that'll mitigate kind of like that break off problem too that I was talking about because that's going to break before
Right.
your braid does.
So, okay, yeah, if your hook gets caught up on something that it's not getting off of.
Yeah. As you wrap it around the stick. I have a stick in my boat. I wrap it around.
Oh, the
Break
break
it
off
off.
stick.
Yeah, break off stick.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. And that, again, that mitigates, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
all
What do
that
you
extra
what do you
stress
wrap
on your
around a
gear.
stick?
The line.
The braided line so you can break it instead of breaking your equipment or cutting your finger down
Where
to
do
the
you
bone.
where do you wrap it around the stick? Is it like
You just take the line it's snagged or hung up on something and you want to break it to get it back.
instead of using your pole to yank back on it, you wrap it around? Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because you usually got stronger line than you'd normally work with because of smaller diameter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a tip too because like if you're fishing, if you're in that hell, you don't have to be 101 level. Everybody's getting hung up all the time. That just happens when you're fishing, right?
Yeah.
But one thing that I've seen kind of people who are newer to fishing do when they do get hung up, there's at times a tendency to want to provide, I guess, more leverage. So they grab their rod above like either the cork butt section of the rod or the foam butt section of the rod. They actually grab it on the graphite rod blank, thinking they're going to get kind of more leverage or force. And I'd say don't do that because you might break your rod right where your hand is.
It's not where they're meant to be grabbed.
It's not where they're meant to be grabbed. And if you do break your rod, number one, you broke your rod. Number two, you might have some, fragments of rod left in your hand if you do that.
That doesn't sound fun.
No.
Larry, anything to add? Ben, anything to add on that?
Good idea.
Yeah, good idea.
I always grab the line. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I kind of get what you're saying about 101. Everyone gets snagged, and I think that's a big thing. I've taken some people fishing before that aren't very experienced, and they seem to get frustrated or like embarrassed that they get snagged. And I think to just encourage them and say, like, this happens to me 10 times a day sometimes when I'm fishing. Will keep them interested in fishing and not discouraged.
Yeah.
Well, and also with that, oftentimes, like fish relate to structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Structure is what you're going to get snagged on. So if you're fishing in the right spot,
you're going to get snagged.
You're going to get snagged.
Yeah. Good to know. That is
true.
Good to know. So
you're almost you're dabbling, you're kind of like trying to ride that fine line a lot of times, I feel.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to win though.
So, all right, we've discussed a medium weight?
Medium action.
Medium action pole, spinning pole and reel, right?
Spinning rod and reel.
Spinning
Yeah.
rod. Okay, it's rod
Well,
and reel. And then some kind of, did we come to a consensus? Maybe there isn't a consensus because there's mono and there's braided line, but Larry runs a hybrid. Maybe that's the way you do it. I don't know.
I think that's a great way to do it. And I think you're not going to pick a wrong one there. You're just going to learn how to fish that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah. you'll figure it out, and then you might try other stuff. But okay. But in general, though, should somebody go? Let's say they go for a mono, just because I feel like when I've looked at fishing line, that's what I've always just pictured. That's the classic kind of, right?
Do most rod
Do they go
do
with
most
this-
rod reel combos, if a person's going to buy a rod reel combo, are they spooled up with mono versus
They are.
braid?
They are. But
Okay.
take it off and buy some good stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so all right, rod and reel combos. Is that when I go into a fishing shop and I see rods and reels and stuff there, I'm going to naturally gravitate towards the rod and reel combo because it seems stressful for me to try and go to find a rod and then then there's this reel and then I got to attach them, then I got to put stuff on it. You're saying that it's not necessarily the best way to go to just take something off the shelf as is and just go with it, with the string. I already forget what it's called.
With the line that's
The line
supplied.
that's already on it.
No,
Yeah.
no. The rod and reel combos are perfectly matched for somebody that's beginning. They've got the right size reel, the right size rod,
Okay.
but usually the line that's on them is less. You're gonna get frustrated because the line is probably heavier than it should have on it and not as good a quality as you should have. So when you're talking about spinning rods or any rods, the most important thing I think for starting out is stay away from the cartoon stuff.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to talk about, and people catch giant fish on cartoon rods. Stay away.
Okay. All right. That's fair. How does one, if you're going and you get a rod and reel combo, so you find this medium weight rod or whatever, the reel on the combos and stuff you said will be the right size for the rod. So is that something you need to really worry about? Or if I went and I was looking for a medium weight rod, am I going to see all kinds of different reels,
Different sizes.
different sizes? And is that just how much line it can fit on it? Or does the size also have something to do with how well it performs?
It's based on what line like Ben said earlier, what line weights that it, like Mark said, a 6 to 12. That was this rod will handle 6 to 12 pound line. Very good.
Okay.
So reels come in different sizes, 10, 20, 30, 40, which are easier to figure out because 10 is the lightest. For most freshwater fishing, 20 or 30 is perfect. I mean, the only difference in those two numbers is spool capacity. And
Spool
how much
capacity.
line.
Not necessarily like heavy dutiness of the actual reel or something.
Yeah, it does, but that all goes with the size line that it'll handle.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And so those reels, they'll be marked to whatever, whether you get a, 10, 20, 30, 40, it'll say it'll hold X amount of this, essentially this diameter line or this weight line. Like, the same reel might hold 200 yards of 6-pound test line, but it might hold 100 yards of 12-pound, right? Because that 12 pound is going to have a larger diameter.
Yep.
So it just
and
takes up
then
more
you
space on
start
the
talking, braid. You got to, it'll
Factor that
hold.
in.
You might have 20-pound braid, and it's going to hold as much as it does for the 6-pound mono, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So, rod, reel, line. That's kind of... there's different lengths of poles too, right? How do you know what length rod to get? Is that...
It'll be dictated, in my opinion, by what you're fishing and how you're fishing
So
for.
it's not like, how tall are you? That determines how
That's part
long
of it,
a
though.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A youngster fishing starting out, so if he's 5 years old, he doesn't want a 7-foot rod.
That's
He might
fair.
be able to find a 5.5-foot rod in the same weight and action.
Okay.
For an average person, I want to say from like 12 years old on, I don't know what you think, Ben, but like a 6 to 6.5 foot rod.
That's pretty standard, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, a 6.6 is definitely, that'd be my go-to for
Yeah.
12 and up. Yeah.
So you started saying something though, almost that it could be dictated by what you're fishing for.
Yeah.
Well, and again, this goes into like different species of fish.
Probably
but like,
above 101 level stuff.
like walleye, bass, a 6'6" spinning rod, awesome. If you're float fishing for steelhead on big river, on a bigger river, you might want a 9 to 10 foot rod, right?
Just to get the rod further off the boat, or
really off the boat. Mostly, it's keeping your line on the water, and then again, that goes into maybe some advantages of braid. Braid's going to float versus mono that won't, so you can get a better drift. If you're float fishing with braid, but
for this kind of sake of the 101 level, the 6.5 foot, 6.5 foot is
it's going to be
a good spot to be.
It's going to be a really nice do-all. I will say, Larry, getting back to your point of kind of youngsters and rods and maybe steering clear of, I guess we'll make all the cartoon rod manufacturers mad right now. Yeah. But with my girls, they're 4 and 5 right now. And when we go fishing, generally we've just done some pan fishing, which we talked about earlier. Awesome starter fish. I use my ice rods.
Oh, good idea.
That's pretty fun.
They're short, lightweight, easy to handle. They can navigate them, as far as like not bumping them around on things. They're perfectly sized.
They are. And the cartoon rods might be good Christmas presents to practice casting in the yard, to get the motor skills until you get into the good stuff. I mean, I think they probably have a place, but not for fishing. Okay. I mean, that's my opinion.
Larry tried to pat it there. I mean, the fishing rods, they're fine for everything but fishing.
But fishing, right, exactly. Okay. I'm remembering the story that Ryan Muckenhern and Kenny Calhoun here have of Kenny on a particular trip of sorts with Ryan, having a few too many beers and going to Walmart and getting a Snoopy pole and hammering fish in the retention pond outside their hotel with it. But anyway, that might be another story to bring Kenny on for to explain. So kind of the rod length, all that stuff, maybe you've got it figured out. Is there, and I'll ask this because I don't want to necessarily like point out certain brands and act like we have favoritism or anything like that. Is there a certain price range somebody should be looking at to stay good quality, but I didn't go way overboard and I also didn't just cheap out and get something that's a piece of crap? Is there, what kind of a price range should I be looking at?
In a rod and reel combo, I would say $59 to $79.
Oh, okay.
Bingo.
Okay, that's not as bad as I thought for some reason. I thought it was going to be over 100.
Oh, I'd try and talk you into something fancier than
well,
that.
That's because I hang around Mark a lot, and Mark likes the fancy stuff. So, Mark,
I'd say, well, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh,
I'd say what's funny is when I was in college, I was pretty poor, and I actually kind of took pride in fishing with really cheap gear, and then out fishing my friends that had like a $200 rod and reel.
Sure.
Although I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, like my muskie rod was like $40, and it was made, kind of marketed towards catfishing in the South, but it's big. You could put whatever line you want on it, and I think I've caught probably about 5 or 6 muskie on it. And
nice.
I've had a couple people while I'm muskie fishing like laugh at me and be like, "That's what you're using? That's never gonna work." And one time, 20 minutes later, I reeled one in. And they helped me land it. So it really, because you could spend $1,000 on a rod and reel combo. I've
totally.
Also caught fish on a $20 rod and reel combo. It just depends on kind of the level that you want to invest in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think probably initially you're not going to know the difference.
Yeah.
You're going to learn what you like. Maybe a different rod's going to have a different level of flex, or it's going to be we can get into actions as far as like we're talking medium heavy, fast action, slow action rods. Like I said, different sensitivities, but like some fishing you don't necessarily need a ton of sensitivity. Some it's beneficial, so, but I think these guys nailed it with like a really good sweet spot there. And we're really blessed, honestly, with modern technologies and a rod now that you can probably get for $50, probably, 10, 20 years ago was a $500 rod.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is, you see that all over the place. Like a plasma screen TV that was 40 inches back in the day used to be like a $10,000 TV. Now you get it on Black Friday for like $200.
Yep.
And it's not plasma anymore; it's LCD. But so that That's good to know, somebody going in. And then you factor in on top of that the line that you're going to get, which it sounds like is probably a good idea to replace the line that it comes with. But that can't be, anything crazy, right?
Yeah, no.
Would you say, Larry, for a spinning rod, would you want I guess what would be considered a softer line or a more rigid line? And I guess speaking specifically to mono.
I would say softer.
Yeah.
There's abrasion resistant. The more abrasion resistant the monofilament line is, the stiffer it is.
Right.
Makes sense.
So 6 to 8, what I call a soft line. I mean, they're pretty brand specific.
Right.
You know.
I know. I've got my favorite.
Yeah. I mean, XL, one brand that starts with XL. XL means extra limp.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the softer the line, the better for spinning, absolutely.
Because like a more rigid line tends to want to kind of almost like jump off the spool.
Right, spool memory.
Yeah.
Another good
Like
reason.
not in a good way, not when you're casting or kind of when you're casting and then you get a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. I can kind of picture that. I picture times where I've looked down at the spool and it's got this. Yeah, it's almost like it almost makes like a coil spring instead of just
another reason to fish braid. No memory.
Good to know.
You're
Mark, your mono is looking pretty sad
You're
right now.
You're not going to talk me into it, Larry.
Well, also, braid is probably 3 times more expensive than mono on average. So
Okay,
it really is what you're trying to fish for and how much you're looking to spend.
Hey,
Yeah.
look, now there's a point where I'm saving money, Jim.
I can't believe it. I honestly can't believe that you like the thing that's less expensive. At that point, like at the point that we described for the rod and reel, is somebody pretty much set up aside from like hook and bait and bobbers?
Well,
Or-
can't forget your license. I mean, that's
True,
the biggest. That's the biggest thing. You don't want a ticket. And
Yeah, that's very true. Which I know in Wisconsin they make it pretty dang easy. You just go on the GoWild.com thing and you just go buy a fishing license.
And we have a free fishing day the first Saturday in June every year.
How does that work?
You can fish with no license. So
Really?
if you're a beginner, there's free state park passes that day. There's no admission, and also you can fish without a license. So
That sounds awesome.
You could say they're trying to get folks hooked, Jim.
yeah,
If MC Ryan could edit in the old, yeah, exactly. That's perfect timing right there.
But yeah, I mean, and that's a really big point. And honestly, I could see, licensing, not necessarily because of the cost being a barrier to entry, but I mean, I'll say this. It seems like a lot of state agencies, and that's going to sound like I'm dogging on the state, but it can be complex. And again, it goes in depending on what you're fishing for. Like you got trout, I'll take our state for this. You trout stamp, Great Lakes stamp. Are you going to fish for like all of a sudden it's kind of like, I don't know. I just wanted to go fishing,
Right.
And I'd say for most 101 type fishing, you probably are going to be okay with a general fishing license, but definitely make sure to check depending on where you're going to be regionally, maybe a specific piece of water. Make sure you've got all the appropriate licensing because, like you said, you don't want to go out there and have a negative experience and get in trouble of something that you just kind of weren't aware of.
And if you're a big hunter, it may make sense. Again, this is speaking of the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if it's like this in other places, but you have that thing that you got where you basically paid one flat fee and you essentially have every license there is to get in Wisconsin.
So, yeah, I'd say a lot of states have, I think here we call it the Conservation Patrons License, and I call it the catch and kill anything license. Is honestly like I buy it as like almost like a safety. Number one, I engage in a lot of different activities. Some I might only do a couple times a year, but I still, duck hunt. I still, steelhead fish in the Great Lake. But number one, you're making a solid donation to the state. Number two, basically, if you want to go do something, you can do it outside of, I guess you still need your federal waterfowl stamp. That's something different. But now we're getting into hunting. But it's also nice because if somebody says, hey, do you want to go do this? You can go.
You just say, yeah.
Like I said, it's a little extra expense, but it's an option to, dot your I's, cross your T's.
Yeah, that is nice. You don't have to think about, am I in a Great Lake or am I in a river or,
Right.
oh, I thought I was good to fish it here, but this turns out that it's this body of water that, or, so.
Yeah, it's actually a very good buy. I mean, it's about the cost of 2 nights out, out to dinner.
Yeah.
It's about the price really of that to a nice restaurant. So
Yeah.
there's a ton of value in it. Mark's got a great point there.
Well,
And going hunting or
hopefully you're
fishing.
making some of that back with a few dinners.
Yeah.
Hunting or fishing is a lot better than going out to dinner.
Yes.
Okay, but good point on the licensing. So you got that stuff. But, as far as gear goes, you kind of just need to get into bait and hooks and bobbers, right?
I'd say it's a great place to start.
Yeah, excellent place to start.
What do you now you have a rod and reel and line on that stuff. What do you put on the line to go catch fish? How do you set that up?
I'm going to start with again, we start going into sizes again.
Yeah.
So we're going to go with a number 6 hook, number 6 wire hook, because the reason I say wire versus
So something a little bit
that's
like
not
this.
wire.
If you're
yeah.
watching on YouTube, Larry brought in the hook that caught Jaws.
Yeah, that's not your standard
That's it.
bluegill rig.
Yeah. So to use it as a size example, this is a 22/0 hook, and the hook you would use is a number 6, which is about the size of the opening's about the size of my little fingernail. So number 6 hook, some red worms that maybe you dug in your backyard. I mean, that's another story. I mean, I was notorious for getting caught in other people's backyards after dark trying to find night crawlers. The guys with the most fertilizer have the most night crawlers, so that's a good tip for a beginner.
All right.
There's a guy on our street that has
We're encouraging.
the lushest lawn I've ever seen in
Yeah.
my life. He might have to kick me out of his yard.
So a dozen night crawlers, some number 6 hooks, maybe a couple medium-sized bobbers. I mean, probably, an inch around, 1.5 inches, and you can probably catch any fish in the United States.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple lead weights.
Yeah, throw in some split shot
Yeah,
perhaps.
split shot sinkers.
What are those you put on the hook end of the bobber,
yeah,
right?
they pinch right
you
on.
pinch them right on, and that
Yeah.
just keeps the hook from.
Keeps it from moving, and you can cast farther. The
Okay.
farther you can cast from shore, the bigger fish you're going to catch.
Okay.
Kind of.
It's going to make sure that your bait stays at the level that you want it to as well.
Okay.
And provides some, depending on the type of bobber you're using, it can assist in holding it, more vertical versus laying on its side.
And you determine how deep it's going to go by where you set the bobber on the line, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Because that essentially then just floats up there, and that your bait hangs from there.
Yep.
Okay.
And that rig is going to work in rivers and lakes,
Yeah.
for multiple species. A lot of
Yeah.
fish like to eat worms.
All right. So you're getting those guys. And so you go, like you just said, lakes, rivers. You just kind of find a body of water. Larry, earlier you were saying find a place where there's fish. Is there a way, or Ben, maybe you can speak to this too. Is there a way to look and say, yeah, I know that place has fish? Do you just kind of, is that all from hearsay, or is there a place online that says, yeah, this body of water has more fish than the other?
There's definitely some word of mouth. Like Larry said, kind of being a bait shop bum or just hanging around bait shops. If you go to pretty much any bait shop in Wisconsin and just ask them what's biting, they're probably going to lead you in the right direction. Like some might not give you their best spots, but they will tell you kind of the weekly report or where the fish are. I think besides that, I know it's kind of common sense, but if you see people fishing in a spot, there's probably a reason they're there. Like they might not be biting that day, but that's sometimes where I keep things in mind. Like, oh, I saw a couple cars back there. There's definitely fish there.
Okay.
Your state regulations will give you some guidance as well as far as which species might be located in a specific body of water.
Okay. But otherwise, you just find some with public access and
Public access, and then to go on both these folks' point, creel census. So the states do creel censuses. I don't know if that's the right word. Is it censuses?
I think so.
Yeah.
sure.
They monitor fish that are caught from a certain body of water. So there's actually a guy or a gal for their college summer job is sitting at a boat landing, counting all the fish that come in off of that lake. So because the state Department of Fish and Game does it, it's all public knowledge. So
Yeah.
and also they do creel not creel services. They do netting in the spring and fall.
Okay.
That's all available online. There's a lot of websites, fishing websites, that'll give you that information, or you can just go on just the state website for whatever state you're in and get the information on fish ratio per acre. Pretty heady stuff, but that'll help. And then, like Ben says, that's kind of my deal, is watching where everybody else is going.
Yeah. All right. Noted. When you get there, you just throwing the thing out there, just throwing a worm on a hook out there, and just kind of anywhere.
Well, one thing I've tried to get better at is I used to kind of be a stubborn fisherman. Like, this is going to work. This is going to work. As I get older, I feel like I will just try multiple kinds of bait to figure out maybe it's a color thing. Like, that day they want this. Other times, sometimes I literally will look in my tackle box, think to myself, what's the last thing you would use? I put that on, and it works for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's just repetition.
When you're talking about color, now you're talking about stuff that isn't live bait, right?
No, more artificials, but
Okay.
I've been amazed sometimes. You know, I'll be fishing with, let's say, a silver and white bait, nothing. And the second I switch to, like, red and black, it's just everything's eating that. I think it mimics a natural bait in the water, whether it's a bug or a minnow that just hatched. It's kind of matching the hatch, as they say.
Well, and it could be light conditions.
Yep.
You know, anything.
Clarity, water clarity.
Yep.
How do you determine? Okay, I'm going to get into the artificial bait thing here a little bit, and I'm sure it's a can of worms. Sorry. Can I get that? Can I get that?
Yeah, we need a
drum?
sound effect again.
Anyway, there's like, that's one of the things that I see a bazillion different kinds of when you go in. And I know it depends on the fish, but again, we're talking kind of 101 level, somebody who's just going out and casting into a lake offshore or into a river or something like that. What might be an artificial bait that you're looking for, if at all, or do you just go live bait when you're doing that?
MEP spinner.
Yep.
MEP
spinner will catch every fish in the world.
Pretty universal.
There's a different size for every fish you could catch.
So there's like small
From a
ones for
double
little-
zero to a number 5 spinner, that's about like that.
And they make musky killers, too, that are like
Yeah.
What
this
does a
big.
MEP spinner look like?
It's a so there's a shaft with a hook on the end, and there's a little thing wound on there. So the spinner, as it goes through the water pressure makes the spinner turn. Right, Mark?
Yeah.
Basically a
How am I
blade.
doing?
Just a little metal
Yeah.
blade.
The blade,
Yeah.
Yeah. So that gives off vibrations. When minnows swim through the water, they give off vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
Fish have a lateral line. Every fish has a lateral line going down the side, which is like their sense of touch.
Yeah.
They can feel it, and they know that if they go towards that sound or that vibration, there's probably going to be food on the other side of it. So it's like a dinner bell.
Yeah. And then you got some flash involved there
Yep.
from the metal blade. And,
Yeah.
of course, then there's, some of the blades are a combination of being, painted, whether that's like the classic red and
Yep.
white
And you go to
a
color
fire
again.
tiger to, a nickel to a brat. There's,
Yeah.
obviously lots of different ones. But
And you're still using that with a bobber and
Oh,
maybe some weights?
no.
Or? No. Okay, so you don't put a bobber on that.
So you tie that direct to your line, nothing else on it.
Oh, okay.
And then instead of throwing it out and watching and waiting for the bobber to go down when a fish hits it, you cast it out. So you can cover more water than watching a bobber. And that'll work in a trout stream, it'll work on a river or a lake.
Is that one of those ones you cast out and then you reel it back in kind of almost immediately?
Definitely cast and retrieve
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
You can change your speeds. That's a nice thing about a spinner, too. The slower, it's obviously going to drop more, and the faster, it's going to hang higher in the water column.
Okay.
Yep. I'd say, the MEP spinners, as far as, we're talking about, casting, retrieving, MEP spinners, rooster tails, and little Cleos
Yeah.
are pretty solid bets for covering water, getting
Wasn't it
reaction.
the little Cleo that you were just using this last weekend when you didn't catch any fish?
Yeah, but I've caught a lot of fish on that. I don't know if you guys have fished them, but I've caught a ton of different things on Dick Knight spoons as well.
It must be a Northwest thing.
It is. It's like it's a super lightweight. I call it like a little flutter spoon. I don't know if that's the correct term for it. Again, a variety of colors, couple different sizes there, but you can troll them, you can back bounce them. Now we're getting into stuff, but I've caught salmon, trout, steelhead, bass, everything on them. But that's a case where you do need to add weight. I'll either add a split shot ahead of it, or sometimes I will use an egg sinker. And I think we should get into egg sinkers a little bit when we're talking about bait fishing as well here. But so I'll slide an egg sinker on my line first, then a small, I'll put a little bead behind that to protect my knot because I'm going to tie on a barrel swivel. And then like Larry was talking about having a leader that he uses with, I'll tie on a lighter weight leader than my main monoline directly to that little flutter spoon.
I think this is where when people think about getting into fishing,
I didn't 101 that one.
It's getting a little heady.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you were not speaking English.
Right. But I was getting excited.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the show where we speak English. I don't know if we want to dive into what you just explained or if that's another podcast.
We'd almost need a visual on that.
You'd need a visual
I think
on
we
that
do.
one.
We'll have to bring in a visual for the YouTube viewers next time we do a fishing podcast on that one.
One thing Mark talked about was color. There's a real important rule, and this is 101. Whether it doesn't matter how experienced you are, bright lures on bright days, dark lures on dark days.
Which seems counterintuitive.
It does.
Yeah.
But it's all about contrast. So think of yourself being a fish underwater, and most of the stuff you go after comes over the top of you.
Okay.
So the silhouette against the sky, bright colors are a better silhouette on bright days and dark. And Mark's right, but it works. It seems to the shading, the way a fish sees something, it's easier for them to see a light lure over the top of their head or a bright lure, orange, chartreuse, pink. I mean, probably the top three. If you went with those three colors, everybody's got their favorite. If you went with those three colors, I think you could catch anything that swims.
And again, talk about counterintuitive or stuff that has never made sense to me, but chartreuse and hot pink, why those are essentially like super go-to colors in a lot of ways.
I think it's got to do with, I did a little studying on this, it's got to do with the cones. Fish have cones in their eyes.
Okay.
And they see things different.
Okay.
Like you'd think red is a bright color, but actually to a fish, it's invisible in deeper than 10 feet of water.
Well, yeah, and
Wow.
if you look at it too, I feel like even like to me, like it's a color that disappears fairly quickly when you drop it down. Getting to what Larry was talking about, bright lures on bright days. So like if you've got a reflective lure, like that'll come into it, like
Like a shiny metal
like a metallic, yeah. And then of course you've got different metallics too. You've got duller finishes versus I guess more reflective surfaces. So again, kind of like that same rule of thumb when you're fishing it on a bright day versus a darker day.
Would you guys say that what makes the difference between a super experienced, quote, good fisher, man or woman, and somebody who's not as good, beginner, is just what they put on their line and how they throw it out there?
I think it's
Like
where it is.
You think it's more where they go and where they cast and everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think most fish will bite on anything, and if it's the right time and the right place, I don't think selection matters. Although, if you talk to a tournament angler, I mean, those guys are hyped. It doesn't matter what tournament. I mean, look at a Bass Pro catalog and look at the colors available on anything.
So they might say it matters what you're choosing, what colors and all that stuff.
Yeah, color specific.
But I think if you're casting to a spot where there aren't fish, you're not going to catch nothing.
No.
So, like you said, you got to be the right time, the right place, know what type of structure, or whether it's lily pads or undercover or underwater rocks, like we encountered a lot this last weekend, or a downed log. Like if you see a big log, maybe a fallen tree that's coming off the bank and down into the water, chances are there's a fish right by it. You might get hung up trying to get them, but you might get them too.
Is that what you're finding too, Ben?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it too. Larry nailed it. Right place, right time. Whether it's the morning or dusk, and I still think though, quite a bit of fishing has to do with luck. I've seen people before that have really no experience, and they sometimes will outfish more experienced angler. I think luck plays into it. Color definitely does, and because I've been fishing before with my dad. Right, I'm on the front of the boat, he's on the back. We're using the same exact bait, and some days I'm catching them all, some days he's catching them all. I think it just sometimes is a little bit up to the fish and luck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing, bass are pretty common fish, right? A lot of states have, good populations of bass, lots of bodies of water hold bass, smallmouth and largemouth, which you'll probably fish for somewhat differently at times. But soft plastics are extremely popular for those species. And again, you can get into colors a lot with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, bass eat weird stuff.
Yeah.
They do. They eat some... I mean, if you go on a lake bed and like run your hand through like a marshy lake or something, there's some pretty ugly looking bugs and stuff, and bass eat all that stuff.
They're into it.
I think bass will eat almost anything.
I
when I was
think
a
they will.
kid, I was reeling in. It was only
Garbage disposal fish.
I was reeling in about a 16-inch bass, and it spit up about a 10-inch snake that it half digested. So
Jeez.
they'll eat anything. I
Yeah.
think most fish are opportunists. Like I know people who fish for trout, and they'll actually use at night they'll use mouse patterns because it simulates a mouse swimming across the creek.
Mouse what?
A mouse pattern. Musky baits, they have like duck baits. They have everything you could imagine. Especially
A whole duck?
yeah, or like a miniature, like a duckling, something like that.
Yeah, imitate like a baby duck that maybe got away from mom a little bit.
Especially
Muskies are crazy.
Way
They're
too far.
They're like dinosaurs
they
underwater.
are sharks, kind of.
Yeah.
And because those hyper aggressive species like trout and muskie, I think they basically will attack and try to eat anything. And I think that's just in their nature.
Like a terrier.
Yeah, they're not afraid of anything.
No.
I mean, they're the top line.
Dominance.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
I think you nailed it, though, as far as being opportunists. I mean, you will get, whatever, you get into like fly fishing for trout, and at times maybe there's a hatch going on, and so the fish are like hyper focused on one thing. But oftentimes, like you said, if it's in front of them, they're gonna eat it.
So being where there's fish. Now, if you don't have like a fish tracker underwater, like Mark was saying, you can try and find some places that would seem to be good habitat for fish to be in. And that would be like, behind rocks or at a down tree log. Something weird just happened in here. Thunderstorm's messing with us. We good? Everybody's alive? Cool. But even in that case, like Mark, you were casting behind a bunch of those rocks and logs, and nothing was biting.
I was shocked, actually.
And in that case, it actually,
I mean, I'm not saying but we're on a stretch of river that had good structure. It's known to be a good smallmouth river. I felt like we were in appropriate water compared to some other parts we were in, and I just have a hard time believing those fish have been fished to very often. The water was pretty fast. I was fishing little Cleo, just kind of a search bait, covering water, getting it in different pieces of pocket water, and nothing.
Yeah, it was weird. But in that case, I mean, it's got to come down to, you guys have all been fishing for a long time. Like, there's just got to be days where you go out fishing and just nothing bites, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because then, like, thunderstorm going on right now, weather is key.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Pressure. Fish don't have eyelids. So they're very susceptible to high pressure. So high pressure, sunlight, sunny day, high pressure day, a fish, it bothers their eyes, so they go to cover. They might go deep cover.
Okay.
Something that is not, accessible. with traditional angling,
Right.
gear.
You just made me think of something, and I think this is an awesome 101 tip. It's pleasant to fish in the summertime, right? But oftentimes it's brighter, sunnier out. A shadow can be as much structure as structure itself, and don't forget docks either, right? Because they're providing structure and shade. So that's something you want to key in on.
So fish don't like bright sun, and when you say high pressure, is that like barometric pressure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it just kind of messes with their fish bladder.
What would that do then, as far as you're saying it's thunderstorming right now? How is that affecting
Right
them?
before the storm,
awesome.
Oh, okay.
Low pressure, man, they're
cloudy.
feeding. Yeah,
But then after, when the cold front comes in, they almost just shut off.
Because then you got the high pressure pushing that out again, and then you run into that same issue.
Interesting.
Like we talked about earlier, not a 101 fish, but I've talked to a lot of muskie fishermen that, like you said, before this storm was rolling in,
Yep.
I mean, they're keying in on that and fishing on the front end of it.
And when muskie, goes so late in the season, sometimes it's like snowing out when you're catching them because that is a storm. But
and
it's unpleasant. Like one of the last times I went,
To say the least.
yeah, I went last year in late November. I think it was about 32 degrees out, and it was right in between rain and snow, and they were biting like crazy. I was using 6 to 8 inch live suckers, and I lost like 5 or 6 suckers before I finally landed a muskie.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's cold. You have to dress for it. You have to wear your neoprene waders.
Yeah, you got to be ready. But a sunny day can still be good if there's cloud cover.
Okay.
So if there's a little bit of humidity in the air, that there's still like ozone or whatever you would call it that still blocks some of the sun. I mean, a totally super sunny day, high pressure, like after a storm would go through, big cold front comes through, then when you get above, I would say 30, it's a bad fishing day. I don't care if it's under the ice. I don't care if it's at night. Night's going to be better. Morning and night are going to be better.
Mm-hmm. There is like a unit of pressure.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And and if you get a long stretch of high pressure, any weather change, whether it gets colder, warmer, the first part of that change, wind direction shift is, this isn't 101, but if you get 4 days of south wind and the wind swings around to the north, it's the front end of a cold front, but it's a change, and it's, I don't know what it does, it triggers fish.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Almost like kind of just snaps them out of
kind
of like their lull that they've been in.
You guys have been out on a lake, and all of a sudden the wind's at your back now.
Yeah.
And the fish start biting. It's not in your face anymore. It's at your back, and the fish start biting.
That's wacky.
Yeah, crazy stuff. Hunters, hunters follow the moon. And the big thing now you see on the commercials is the red moon. Moon underfoot, moon up above.
Yeah.
My favorite day to go fishing, no matter what the weather conditions, if the moon is up during the day, in daylight.
Good.
Oh, like when you wake up in the morning, the moon you can still see it.
10 o'clock in the morning, moon's still up. There you're golden.
All right.
Boom.
That's a pro tip.
Yeah, that's a pro
tip right there.
Yeah.
Noted.
I'm going to go back to a 101 rig that I think could be beneficial to a lot of folks. And again, it involves an egg sinker, which is it's an egg-shaped lead sinker with a hole in it. So you slide that on your line.
Do you crimp it down?
Nope, it's free floating,
okay,
right?
Cool.
Which that's part of the benefit of it, right?
Okay.
Then I would tie that to a barrel swivel, which is it's not a snap swivel, so it doesn't have anything.
You're going back to this thing
I know,
again.
but it's still pretty simple. It's a simple setup. I removed at least the plastic bead to protect your knot. And of course you might lose a fish. And then a leader off the other side of that barrel swivel to
What's a leader?
Just another piece of monofilament.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So just a shorter piece of monofilament appropriate to whatever, length that you're trying to do. And then a hook and your bait. Cast it out. Let it sit on the bottom. This would be like I consider this like a good catfish rig or something like that. You can leave your line taut, where it's a little bit tighter. The other nice thing is if you just leave a little bit of slack, I guess, when that fish picks up that bait, they're not going to feel that resistance because all they're feeling is the bait sliding through that sinker that's on the ground. So they're not going to be as likely to like feel that tension and get nervous about it and let it go. And I mean, it's kind of a set it and forget it type fishing where you can get your rod if you have some sort of rod holder or heck, a forked branch. Yeah, some people tie bells to their rod to the tip of their rod as like kind of to auditorily like, oh my gosh, I'm getting a bite. I need to go over and reel that fish in. It's a nice, relaxing way to fish and can be pretty darn effective for catfish, and other stuff will pick it up too.
Okay, bring this setup in, and then we'll take a picture of it.
Okay.
And then people can actually see what the heck you're talking about.
Okay.
Because I don't get it.
That's a mark rig.
That's a mark. That's the mark.
You guys never fished that at all, ever?
There's a variation of that used for walleye fishing. I think there's a lot of variations of that rig.
Right. Yeah, it'd be considered kind of like a Lindy rig type thing.
Yeah, Lindy rig, and sometimes instead of a hook, they'll put a floating hook, floating jig on it to keep it up in the current. I think you guys do something like that for steelhead, don't you?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, for a drift fishing
jig
rig.
Another word for hook.
Well, it's like a hook, but it has like a sinker built into it.
Oh,
so the
kind of
weight
formed
instead
out
of
of it.
on the line would be right here.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
a lead weight.
Okay.
One of the rigs that we had set up for last weekend was a jig. So it was a jig head or a jig hook. So you had like like you said, it was a lead head jig, right? And then it's got the eye of the hook. The jig head provides the weight, and then I threaded a soft plastic onto that jig it was kind of like a creature bait, kind of like crawfish imitation type thing.
Got it. All right. Last question I wanted to ask. How often are you guys fishing to eat fish versus just fishing to just catch and release?
100%.
100% what?
Eating.
For eating fish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Larry's not letting too many legal walleye back.
Not too many.
So you got to know what's legal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's possession limits you got to stay in.
Okay.
If you
Sometimes, size restrictions.
got restrictions, slot limits. I mean, there's a lot of stuff.
So, again, check your regs.
How about
Yeah.
you, Ben?
I think for me, it just depends so much on what I'm going for. I really like trout fishing down by like the Viroqua, kind of La Crosse region, the driftless region. When I'm trout fishing, I don't typically keep that many. On the other side, when I go fishing on Mendota with my dad, we're keeping every panfish that's big enough to eat.
Oh,
to get a
man, you're
fillet
keeping
off of.
Mendota fish?
Yeah, we do. I
Man.
haven't noticed too many.
You haven't found anything wrong with those?
Just the 6-toe, but wasn't too bad. No, but like Larry said, if I catch 5 walleye that are legal, I'm probably going to keep them, unless they get too big. Sometimes if a fish gets too big, it gets a little bit less sought after in terms of taste.
Yeah. Selective harvest. I mean, take a few to eat, throw a few back.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I'd say about the same. It seems like some fish, for whatever reason, whether it's culturally or maybe just from a palate, like you keep some species, you're more inclined to let some species go. It can depend on the day too, or even time. Like I had time to go fishing, but maybe I don't have time to take care of these fish, get them home, clean them, get them processed, and put up.
Yeah.
But I'd say, if I'm walleye fishing, I'm on a meat hunt.
Yeah.
If I'm salmon fishing and it's legal, I'm probably on a meat hunt, When you get into salmon and steelhead, oftentimes there's wild fish restrictions. You can keep hatchery fish, but you can't keep wild fish. Oftentimes delineated by the presence or not of the adipose fin. They'll clip that off in the hatchery. People call them clippers or fin clipped or whatever. So, but depends on the place too. Sometimes if you're going back home that night, maybe you don't need to keep that fish, but if you're, in the middle of the wilds like we were the other day. Camping.
Yep.
It's nice to have a nice little shore lunch.
Excellent. All right, what do you say we do some last calls, Mark? I'm sure you have 7. And then Larry and Ben will end on you guys.
All right.
I'll start.
Okay.
All I'm going to say is that it sounds like I'm going to go get about a 6.5-foot medium weight pole and rod and reel combo and put some, Mark, I think I'm going to go with a braided line.
Hey, it's your life.
Braided line on it and get a number 6 hook, some lead weights and a bobber, and some worms
Good call.
out of my neighbor's yard, and I'm just going to send it.
I think you boiled it down.
It's going to send it.
All right. Preferably on a cloudy day or right before a thunderstorm. Okay, Mark, you're up.
Man, I think like we were talking earlier, I can't remember if it was when we were on or off, but fishing is so fun, and you learn so much from it. Not even a lot about fishing, a lot about fish, the different types of fish. You're going to see some amazing things out there. I think there's just something extremely, if you haven't fished before, you should go fishing because there's something so extremely just primally exciting about it. I would challenge anybody to hook a fish for the first time and feel it on the end of their line and get it to the bank and not be smiling. I don't think it's possible. And there's so many different types of fish, places you can go. It can bring you to amazing parts of the world. Start fishing, man.
Yeah.
If you haven't been fishing, start fishing. You're going to love it.
That's it?
I guess. I don't know.
I don't mean
Like
that,
we talked
I don't
about, there's
mean
just
that
so
wasn't
much-
a good one. I'm just saying you only had one
there's just
last call.
There's so much to it.
Yeah.
There's so much to it. There's nuances. There's different. Like I said, there's if you like hobbies where there's a lifetime of learning.
Yeah. That's a great one. I didn't mean to insult the integrity of your last call. I was just surprised that you only had one.
That's it. It's so
right.
it's so big. It's hard to have more than one.
Well done. All right. Larry?
My last call is if you're looking for information in bait shops, other fishermen, don't be too eager. Fishermen have tremendous egos, and they're very secretive, so play to both of those.
Okay.
Congratulate them on a good catch. Sometimes if a guy comes in with a nice trophy fish or a limit of fish, if you can kind of ask around, bite around the edge, and get enough information.
Noted. All right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Play it clever. Play it sly.
Where'd you catch those may not be the best question to ask.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when you're sliding over there looking at his fish, look at what lures he's got on his rods.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good
Another
to know.
pro tip from Larry.
Good to know.
I guess my last call is going to be just about Wisconsin. I grew up fishing in Wisconsin. I think I've caught almost every fish in Wisconsin except for paddlefish. We have great waterways in Wisconsin. I hope we keep them that way, from the rivers, streams, lakes. And I guess, too, Larry and I will have to get out of here walleye fishing in the fall.
Mm-hmm. What's a paddlefish? I'm trying to remember
they're
what
like
that is.
prehistoric. They're pretty endangered.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of dinosaurs.
Plankton eaters, right?
Yeah,
They
only
have a
fish
big
on the
long
surface.
snout on them, and they swim with their mouth open,
Yeah.
and their gill rakers pick up. They eat plankton. They're giant fish,
They're
like
huge,
60,
yeah.
70 pounds.
Ooh.
And what the big snout does is it keeps them balanced in the water as they're swimming with their mouth open. Kind of stabilizes them.
Yeah.
I mean, their mouth is like a bucket.
Yeah, almost like a whale in the way it feeds.
That is a good analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Plankton. You said plankton eaters, yeah.
there's no bones in them. They got one thing of cartilage goes down their back.
Shark-like, sturgeon-like.
Yeah. I'd say
Dinosaur.
more whale and shark-like.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
That's another thing about fishing. There are so many different kinds of fish.
yeah, and it takes you to cool places.
Ryan's got one up.
Look at that,
right
MC
there.
Ryan. Thank you very much. Look at that thing. It looks like a platypus fish. It's so much like a normal fish, and then you get to its face, and it's not.
Yeah, very prehistoric.
Freshwater billfish.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Excellent. All right.
All right.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Folks out there who are kind of at this entry point into fishing, kind of looking to get started in perhaps. Hopefully this helped you out. But, of course, if you have other questions, let us know. And like everyone here has pretty much said, there are very many different ways to fish for different kinds of fish. So perhaps we'll have to get into some of that here in the future. So I think we'll sign off. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody, and fishing.
And
Tight
fishing.
lines. Tight lines.
Tight lines. All right.
Keep
Bye.
that tip up. Bye. That's actually like totally like a 101 tip. Don't, keep that line tight. Don't horse them. Don't horse them.
Yeah.
But keep that line tight.
Yeah. Easy way to lose.
You always want to keep pressure on that fish, Jim.
Oh, right. Gotcha. All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.